This is a question I never thought I'd find myself answering. But you guys keep asking me, if Violet and Tony were to have a child, would the child be super or not? So I'm basically going to tell you everything I know about the science behind the super children. Hello there! How you doing? Okay, I'm really going to try and avoid using where do babies come from cliches. So yeah, basically, when two people love each other very much, for God's sake, when two people get busy, anyone get my Incredibles reference there?
And got busy!
They kind of create a mini version of the two of themselves combined, which is called a baby. Sorry, that was the most Seamus-ish definition ever. I'm gonna make this video more scientific. So the thing that makes you the person you are your genes. But despite making you an independent individual, your genes also mean you probably look like other members of your family, specifically your parents. For example, in the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter always gets told, "You have your mother's eyes." Despite the fact Lily has brown eyes in the film, I'm still not over that. Genes influence what we look like on the outside and what we are like on the inside. And these genes are made up of something called DNA. And each DNA molecule has two important properties. Firstly, it can make copies of itself. But that isn't really important to this video, so you can forget that now. Secondly, it can carry information, and that is more important to this video, and I might bring it up again, so remember that. DNA molecules are tightly packed around proteins called histones, to make structures called chromosomes. Human beings have 23 pairs of chromosomes in each cell, making 46 in total, 23 from each parent, which is why you're basically a mini combo of your parents. Some characteristics, such as eye colour for example, are controlled by a single gene, and these genes may have different forms. And different forms of the same genes are called alleles. So back to that eye colour example, you either have an allele for blue eyes, you have an allele for brown eyes, or you have an allele for green eyes, or you have an allele for whatever other colour your eyes are. And alleles are dominant or recessive. Okay, yeah, great science lesson, Seamus, but what does this have to do with the Incredibles and supers? Well, since DNA carries information, we can assume that being a super is passed down from parent to child. Like, I don't think it's just some strange, crazy coincidence that two supers managed to have 3 super children. That would just be some, like, really weird coincidence, wouldn't it? So yeah, I'm pretty sure Violet Dash and Jack Jack's powers were passed down. And this ability to have superpowers may not be controlled by a single gene. And it can't be proven or disproven whether it does or not. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that being a super can be controlled by a single gene. So if you don't want to believe that, you can stop watching the video now, leave a dislike, leave a hate comment, I'm sure you will. But for those of you who do want to consider the possibility that being a super could be controlled by a single gene, then being a super is controlled by alleles. As I said earlier, alleles are either dominant or recessive. And if you don't know what that means, basically, a dominant allele always shows, even if the individual only has one copy of the allele. But a recessive allele only shows if the individual has 2 copies of the allele. Okay, that might not have made sense, so I'm going to give an example. So say Elastigirl, a super, had an affair and had a child with Syndrome, a non-super. And assuming the theory on how the Incredibles got their powers to be true, which I do, the Super Cullen Brothers got a great video on it. Elastigirl has 2 super alleles, I'll call them S, whereas Syndrome has 2 non-super alleles, and I'll call them N. So their child will have 1 S allele and 1 N allele. Therefore, if being a super is a dominant allele, the child will be super, because they only need 1 copy of the allele. But if being a super is a recessive allele, then the child will be normal, because they need 2 copies of the recessive allele. And if you're thinking, well, why is this important? It isn't really, because both Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl were supercharged by the government and will have 2 super alleles. So their children would be super regardless of whether it's a recessive or dominant allele. It gets more interesting when you think of characters like Frozone, who Samuel L. Jackson has confirmed to be returning for The Incredibles 2, and his wife Honey, who isn't believed to be a super since she doesn't go fight at the end of the film. They don't have any children to our knowledge in The Incredibles, but if they have had children by the time The Incredibles 2 comes out, the child would be super or not super, depending on whether being a super was a dominant or recessive allele. And then that would finally answer the question of, can a super and a non-super have a super child? And that is everything I know about how super babies work. Obviously I can't give a definitive answer because we don't know if being a super is a dominant or recessive allele, but maybe we'll find out in The Incredibles too. I personally think it's recessive, so yeah, let's discuss that in the comments, but try not to start a war, okay? I'd like to thank my friend Thomas, who's studying medicine at university. He helped me research and write the script and basically did all the biology behind this video. In terms of the science behind what powers the children have, well, I don't really know. However, I do have a theory on another video on this channel where I discuss this. I specifically go over why Violet has 2 powers, but I do explain why the others have have their specific power set too. So click on the card to check it out. And if you've seen that video but want to keep updated on future videos, click subscribe here and check out my other social medias here and in the description. And thank you for watching.